Hello and welcome to this Oda episode of the Eternal Law. In the last Oda episode, we saw the Oda Empire begin to lose the frontiers of its domain as the Yamanouchi forces pressed into Echigo and captured the castle with ease. Then Tokugawa forces snuck up through Owari and began to attack Mino province in the heartland of the Oda territories. The small defending force put up a valiant fight in an attempt to stop them getting into the castle. However, the enemy's slight veterancy advantage and numerical advantage led to them capturing the castle with heavy losses. Then on the west side of the Oda domain, the Amako forces attacked Tango with a massive army, giving no chance to the defenders to stop them. Another province was lost. Then back over on the east side, the Honma forces tried to attack Hida. However, General Kiyunori moved an army to stop them, leading a dangerous frontal assault on their missile-oriented force. However, he managed a large rear attack at the same time, which caused the enemy to break in fear, and the majority of the army was destroyed as they attempted to retreat. Then General Nobunaga led a counterattack on Mino, seeking to take it back from the Tokugawa forces, and by using his ninja to completely obliterate the enemy's leadership before the battle began, it was an easy victory. Finally, the Amako forces attempt to move into Wakasa, but meet an Oda ambush. Now let's continue with the battle. Snivelling rats is all I see, fields of them, all thinking they're safe so close to the hawk's nest. They can bring up 1,000 more men a day, and I will never believe they have the power to defeat me. But we needn't worry anyway. I've already sent for my son and General Munayuri, my oldest brothers in arms. Together we shall wipe Ormi clean of the traitorous pigs who snorted our dominance. Then we shall see how the cowardly Shogun changes his tune when the heads of his minions are thrown over his palace walls. So here we are at the ambush site in Wakasa province. The army of Oda Nobuyuki is attacking this Amako invasion force from two sides. The problem being that the Amako invasion force is very heavy, not the sort of force that can be easily displaced by simply ambushing them. We're going to have to grind them down in a hard fight. You can see the enemy begin by trying to outflank one of my forces with cavalry. However, I did have a very limited number of speed units on this flank who were able to stop the enemy cavalry from affecting the movements of my infantry, who are going to continue moving towards the main body of the enemy forces. You can see the enemy are slightly indecisive about which way they should go. They split their army and go both ways, which is ideal for us. And so the heavy infantry begins to engage. Here an advantageous fight as my Katana samurai attack the enemy's Yari samurai. On this side I had mainly Ashigaru and spear units, whose main objective was simply to hold in place, whilst the other side of my force won victory and then came across the battlefield to aid. However, the enemy does have a lot of pressure on this side. They've got a lot of their heavy units coming against my Ashigaru, so they're going to struggle to hold up. However, I do have the ability to outflank them because my line is slightly longer than theirs on that side, so hopefully I can use that to my advantage. Back over on the main side of the ambush, the forces are going at it tooth and nail. You can hear that my general is under attack. Some of the enemy cavalry broke through my spearmen and have engaged Nobuyuki's bodyguards. Very dangerous situation. Nobuyuki could easily be killed in such a situation. However, my spearmen disengaged from another fight to come and help him out, and he was saved quite rapidly. However, another unit of enemy cavalry comes around my left flank and rear attacks some of my infantry. Very bad news. They took moderate losses in that attack. However, I still have approximate numerical equality with the enemy on this battlefront. On the other side of the map, my Ashigaru forces are beginning to wane. You can see the enemy has a very heavy presence here. My men are only 1 or 2 rows deep. The only place where it's going well is on the right flank, where some long Yari Ashigaru have outflanked the enemy and are destroying them very easily there. Here in the centre you can see I've deployed some of my matchlock Ashigaru to try and fight the supporting fire into the backs of blobs of enemy troops. However, the AI kind of glitched out and they just stood there for the entire battle, unfortunately, so they didn't prove as decisive as I would hope they would be in this situation. You can see the fight has degenerated into several smaller lumps of fighting. In pretty much all of them the enemy does have a numerical advantage, unfortunately, so I'm relying on me winning somewhere in the battle and being able to move and outflank these enemies. And you can see that's beginning to happen here on the left flank of the main section of the ambush. With a large numerical advantage, I'm pushing my general in just to speed things up that little bit more, and I'm starting to move my forces northward on the battlefield to come around the back of the enemy. The bad news is that the Ashigaru force on the other side of the battlefield here is beginning to die. We've lost almost all of it, except for the one flanking unit which was doing all the flanking, which is still at pretty much full health. So as my flanking unit defeats the enemy, whilst the enemy are distracted mopping up my survivors, the rest of my army has to focus on taking out the heavy enemy infantry still engaged in these big blobs. It looks like here we have gained a numerical advantage. We just have to defeat these last remaining enemy katana samurai, and we've got our own katana samurai on the job. Shouldn't be too hard. This blob here looks like it's going quite badly, so I'm going to be moving my reinforcements in to help them. In the end, it was this unit, the long Yari Ashigaru from the other side of the battlefield, that came across and actually turned the tide. You can see they're absolutely annihilating this unit of enemy Yari Samurai here. The Yari Samurai just can't get past their spears. They're all being slain in the process. So now the battle became a mopping up job. I'd already lost all the units I was going to lose, and the rest of the ones I had were still at relatively full strength. It was simply a matter of running at the enemy units and causing them to rout as they realised things weren't going their way. So in the end, the ambush was a decisive victory for the Oda forces. We did take some considerable losses, however the enemy army has been completely destroyed, which means safety for Wakasa province for now. And it's a blow to the morale of the Amako forces in general. You can see we lost 5 regiments here, and many of the other regiments took heavy casualties, particularly the Katana Samurai, who faced the brunt of the fighting against the enemy's heavy infantry. They took huge losses. There's going to be a few turns before this army is really able to fight again, but at least Wakasa is safe for now. Now the Hatakeyama forces move an army up towards Umi province, where the situation is already dire, so they're making things even worse. For some reason one of my units of Yari Ashigaru decides to try and ambush them. Obviously a poor idea, so I tell him not to do it. But still, now we have 3 enemy armies against our 1 in Umi province. And yet there's more bad news to come as the turn ends, because there's been an Iko-Iki revolt in Echizen. It seems they were getting rather angry with my rule, mainly because of religious differences, because the Iko-Iki simply don't support our way of life. So this means there's now a small army here. Luckily the army is mostly Ashigaru by the looks of it. They weren't able to get any samurai into their rebellion, which is good news. So it shouldn't be too hard to handle. Even if they attack the castle, we might be able to hold them. The real bad situation is here. We have these 3 huge and veteran armies. One of them is led by, I think, the daimyo of the Amako forces. They have tons of samurai and tons of experienced Ashigaru. So what we need to do is get as many men as we can, try and gather up all the troops that Oda have in the area and pile them into this battle, because if the enemy assaults the castle, our daimyo Oda Nobuhide will certainly be killed. You can see I've already got General Takayama Muneyori stationed behind the castle to provide reinforcements in the event of a fight, and I'm moving up Nobunaga, who's fresh from his victories in Mino, bringing a slightly depleted army over to take part in the battle. I'm swapping Takayama's position with the position of that rogue Yari Ashigaru unit to get them closer to the battlefront. The Yari Ashigaru can just guard the rear. So now we have approximately 3 armies against the enemy's approximately 3. A slightly more fair situation. The only problem is that our 3, some of them are depleted, and some of them are simply not as powerful, because a lot of Oda Nobuhide's army are just garrison units with no battle experience. I was able, as you can see here, to move a Metsuke up to kill one of the enemy ninjas in the area. This means the enemy can't sabotage any of my armies and stop them from providing reinforcements into any battles that take place. And now I'm taking a risky move, because I knew everything was going to depend on this battle in Umi. I'm moving all of my forces from Owari over to here, leaving only a very small standing army to defend against any Tokugawa attacks here. A risky move, so we could be losing our home province, but it was worth the risk, because I knew we couldn't lose Umi or our daimyo, because they are both extremely important in this campaign at the moment. So we can have a little look at the army here that Nobuhide is commanding. He has a number of katana samurai who are unfortunately slightly depleted, but he has enough to stand up against the enemy's first army, which is mainly spear units. So I thought, well, this is good news, but of course we have to look through all of the other enemy armies that are here as well, because we're going to be effectively facing all 3 of them at the same time. You can see that they have a mix of heavy infantry, ninjas, and a small number of Ashigaru, who are going to be facing off against our veteran armies here of Takayama and Nobunaga, who are also a mix of samurai and Ashigaru. Unfortunately, fewer men than the enemy has, and slightly less veteran. But anyway, it is time for one battle to decide the fate of Oda. Let's head into it. So, it shall all be decided in one battle. Let us, friends, all remember what is at stake here. To lose means Omi will fall and our lord will be lost. To lose means the end of our supply lines to our northern fleets and armies, including that of Nobuyuki. To lose means there'll be nothing to stop the enemy attacking our dearest homes. We are part of the grandest Oda army ever assembled. If we are destroyed, then what hope will there be for the few that remain? So you see, this battle today shall decide the course of history. It's a wintry battlefield for the Oda forces. Nobuhide's men were already deployed on the field in a pretty ragtag formation, simply a giant line for the moment, because I'm waiting for the rest of my forces to arrive on the field before I decide on my actual formation. We can have a look at what the enemy forces are doing. They too are bringing in their reinforcements. The 2nd Amako army there coming in for the north. Now there's massive lag because I gave all of my units an order simultaneously and the game doesn't like it. And as we break through that, we can go and move on. Look at the enemy's main army, which is coming up the centre. We can't see all of it because some of it's in forests. And then the Hatakeyama reinforcement army, which is just entering the field. Some of its units too kind of disappear because they're ninjas. And you can see that the game is lagging a fair bit. Luckily the frame rate wasn't dropping, it was just rendering fewer frames, which I think was a good compromise. Anyway, as the battle moved on, the enemy forces, well their first army at least, began to move towards me, and I was tempted down off my little hill position to move forwards, because the idea that I could attack the enemy's first army before the other 2 armies arrive was very attractive to me, and is pretty much the textbook way to deal with a situation where you have a little fragmented force like this. You have to try and attack all of them one at a time. However, the enemy army, although it began walking towards me, started turning back again, which meant I had to slightly change my strategy. You can see what I'm doing is I'm forming a giant ball-like formation where my center is further back than my 2 flanks. The idea being I could pull the enemy towards the center and then try and envelop them. It's not really going to happen on my right flank because the lake is in the way, but on the left, my left flank is definitely a possibility, especially because my units are all hidden in forests. We just have to wait for the enemy to advance and see what it is exactly that they do. Now luckily for me, they actually did do what I thought they would. They started moving towards the center, which allowed my left flank to start moving around to outflank their army in a kind of strategic way. You can see here where I've ordered my units to go. I've moved them out of hiding from the forest to start coming around the side of the enemy. We're going to get loads of messages about hidden units being discovered, as where the enemy ninjas are all just coming out of hiding because they're getting too close to our army. You can see the Hatakeyama forces sent some cavalry against my flanking force. Only 1 unit on its own, not really going to do anything, and I had some Yari samurai in the area who pretty much just stopped the cavalry dead in their tracks and killed half of them almost straight away. So the first blood of the battle has been spilled and it's gone our way by the looks of things, so that's good news. But now you can see the main lines are just about beginning to engage. The enemy's archers are firing at our men and we're actually taking heavy casualties. This unit of Long Yari Ashigaru lost 1/3 of its men already while I was distracted doing other things. But I think it must have been around this time that I noticed it, because you can see I've decided to charge my front line forwards in an attempt to meet the enemy and start the melee engagement, because I'm at a missile disadvantage. I'd rather get things started. You can see here I've seriously outflanked the enemy. However, the enemy are going to adjust their formation slightly to stop me outflanking their units individually, which actually in this game means you don't get any morale advantage. So in the end, that flanking action isn't going to have too much of an impact on the battle. Here on the far right flank, the enemy have started piling into my men. This is my weakest point on the battle line, because this is where Nobunaga's army is stationed, and his men are all depleted from the battle at Mino, which means these Oda regiments are going to be smaller than some of the other ones. Now here in the centre you can see the battle has very quickly become just a series of blobs fighting each other. Loads of gaps in the line opening up, but the enemy aren't exploiting them thankfully. They'd rather come in and kill my men than get any kind of situational advantage. You can see I've pretty much charged out to meet the enemy in most cases, attempting to kill some of them with a charge bonus. Here on the big flanking manoeuvre, things are going okay. In the corner I'm managing to get quite a lot of kills, and the enemy are kind of trying to outflank my flanking manoeuvre. Because I had a large reserve, I'm able to stop them, as you can see here, so the enemy can't quite get around my flanking forces, and I have more reserves still moving up. The idea being I was going to plug that gap you can see there. See a few explosions going off because I'd moved some Kisho Ninja up. I tried to attack some of these Lone Sword Ashigaru, but I think I actually hit a load of my own men in the process, which was bad news. And you can see half the Lone Sword Ashigaru who got hit actually just get back up. It seems the explosions weren't deadly enough. Now, I do believe those ninjas killed hundreds upon hundreds of men throughout the course of the battle, so that explosion tactic does seem to work anyway. So here in the centre you can see it's just a complete mess, and the mess doesn't look to be in my advantage. You can see the yellow lines of Oda troops on the right are far thinner than the greyish lines of enemy troops on the left, well, what was the left. So it looks like the centre is under heavy pressure, and it will of course eventually break. I need to win the battle over here really, because this is the area where I do actually have numerical advantage in some of these little fights going on. The enemy are still deploying more and more forces into this and gradually countering my numerical advantage. I'm deploying the last of my reserve here to stop the enemy outflanking me, and this means I'm out of options. The battle has officially become a slugfest and all the tactical things I can do have been done. We're going to have to just see what happens. My lord, our men are faltering. They will have taken the right in a matter of minutes. You must flee. Flee. This is the battle to decide the fate of the Oda. Death is a perfectly reasonable fate, don't you think? Anyway, we've not lost this battle yet. The rear guard will be here soon. I intend to live at least until they arrive. In the meantime, I do believe their horses are pushing through to us. Come on, time to bloody our swords. Sound the charge! So the slugfest went on. You can see the enemy are beginning to win out. Parts of my right flank have already crumbled. Very few men left, about 30 here who are coming back from a rout. Here the Ashigaru forces on this area are completely routing. I believe the samurai in the area rout around the same time here. So the enemy have freed up my right flank and their left flank and are now able to start peeling their way down and coming to attack my centre from behind. Extremely bad news. The only defence I have against it is the fact that that flank is so far away from my centre. It's going to take the enemy some time to actually get into position to do so. But the centre itself isn't in good shape either. You can see my rear is under heavy attack. My generals and archers being attacked by spearmen. Very bad news. And it looks like my left flank, which was the centre of my power, is in trouble as well. General Muneyuri is sitting amongst the bodies of his men, contemplating life and death by the looks of things. You can see here, things aren't going too badly. We actually have a somewhat strong position here. This part of the battlefield not so much. I think my ninjas are really tipping the balance there. But here we actually don't have such a numerical disadvantage. We basically have a regiment for each of theirs in this battle. In this section on the far end things are a little bit better. If we have a look over the battlefield, things look quite messy. Bodies everywhere, enemy cavalry are marauding around, and you can see the Oda lines, wherever they are much thinner than the enemy lines engaging them.
Shameful display!
More Ashigaru routing from the centre here. It looks like the centre is about to break. These men are heavily outnumbered, almost 10 to 1 by the looks of things, so they are in big trouble. And look at this, the enemy's left flank is piling in towards their own centre. It looks like they're about to dominate the centre with all these extra units they're bringing in. The enemy actually has about 60 regiments on the field against the Oda's 40. And the reason for that is that there is an artificial limit on the game on how many units the player can command at any one time, which is 40. But I do actually have around 60 regiments to command, and the rest of those regiments are only now entering the battlefield. Now that half of my men are dead, the enemy allows me to put more regiments in. So this means I basically have some fresh reinforcements coming into the battle, and what I do with them is obviously going to decide the course of the entire fight. So for now I'm trying to build them together into a formation at the back, whereas the centre simply continues to be a bloodbath. I didn't want to dive right into this centre because it was kind of a lost cause. This was the only unit here that I sent to actually aid the centre, a single unit of Long Yari Ashigaru, which I sent in just to clear out some of the enemy general units which are marauding around the centre, hoping I could kill some of their officers and start demoralising the enemy. And I believe they did kill at least one this unit. However, you can see they got attacked from behind, and they kind of got engaged in a melee here which lasted an extremely long time. They held out for ages and distracted a large number of enemy units from my other movements, which was good. Here on my extreme left flank, we've actually almost found victory. It looks like my men are about to dominate the enemy. Here things aren't quite as good, they're still going okay. Here just a few Oda troops remain, fighting with just a few Hatakeyama troops. It looks like we are winning in this engagement here, so another slight victory for the Oda happening. Muneyuri has stopped sitting around the battlefield and is now retreating from the centre entirely, meaning all of my officers at this stage have retreated from the centre. They're all alive, but they're all going to join the reserves coming in at the back to form a second army to defend against the rest of the enemy's onslaught. You can see the enemy has a huge number of units here that are piling into my left flank, so my left flank's going to fall even though it looks like it was winning. but more and more Oda units are joining the field. And you can see what I'm doing with them here. I'm setting up a defensive position on this hill, spears in front, archers in the middle, and reserves at the back. The idea being that this position should just be able to be held for a fairly long time, in the hope that I can grind the enemy down by attrition, because they're all very tired. They have to run through the snow, they've been running through the whole battle, and I believe that by simply standing still I'll be able to beat the enemy, or have them beat themselves in their attempts to come and attack me on this hill. So my formation is forming up now. You can see it has spear walls in the middle, lots of Naginata Ashigaru guarding both flanks units, which are very good for holding positions. They don't die very easily. In the middle I have some bow samurai who are supporting my men on the right flank of my new army, where the enemy have decided to send some preliminary units to attack here. The enemy actually decided to focus quite a lot on the right flank of my new army for no particular reason, so I deployed most of my Naginata Ashigaru there to simply delay them and stop them getting around the edge of my spear wall. You can see I still have a unit of Long Yari Ashigaru fighting on the battlefield. What I also have outside the formation is this unit of ninja, which came in as a reserve in a position which was too difficult to get to the main force from, so I decided to use them as a distraction instead. I'm simply drawing away some enemy units from their main formation up onto a hill, just so that they don't get involved in the main fight and give me slightly higher chances of winning. The enemy is really now piling into my right flank with all their samurai and Ashigaru. You can see my Ashigaru are still pretty prevalent here. They're going to quite easily hold this area by the looks of things, simply because the men at the front of my lines aren't going to be dying very quickly, which means the enemy are going to be at least severely delayed if they want to try and get around my centre. In the centre, things are going well. The enemy has attacked uphill into the spear wall, as I hoped they would. Here, the enemy's heavy sword pirates have an extremely hard time getting through this spear wall. This really isn't the sort of thing they're suited to. The spear wall is attacking them downhill and is very thick. The enemy are simply being slaughtered. You can see the enemy general here came up to try and support his troops, but some of my bowmen behind the spear wall managed to slice him off his horse with a few arrows. So that's the end of him. The enemy's morale is going to be further weakened by this blow. So it looks like here, all of the fights that are going on are to my advantage, but at the very least, I have more men locally than they do, so I'll win in a slugfest situation. Some of the enemy units here started breaking actually, and I decided to move some of my units out around my own right flank to stop the enemy getting into it. So the right flank is going to be closed off. I'm going to force the enemy into the centre. Back up on that hill with the ninjas are being engaged by a whole bunch of enemy units, and they're doing valiantly, fighting on against all of them. I believe they actually defeated one whole regiment of enemy troops and severely depleted the rest of them, and they keep fighting even though they've taken huge losses at this stage. So this was good because it's keeping all of these units here and these other ones would just quit the battle to go and attack them, meaning my main force is going to have a much better chance of winning out. Follow them up, that's the last of them up there. I can see their leader. A palace for the man who brings me his head. Cut through those spears, boys, come on. They're more tired than you are. What are you doing? Break up their line, get in there. What? No, you first, you oaf. Cut the tips off. Ugh, fine, I'll show you. Let me, move, let me, come on. Just move their spears aside like this. There you... Okay, less pushing at the back. I said less pushing at the back. There's too bloody many of... Ah! So the enemy centre is being annihilated on my centre, while my right flank is beginning to be overwhelmed by the sheer number of enemy troops still here. However, we are getting gradual advantages as the centre units can start moving down to help the right flank. You can see the enemy centre is retreating here. The enemy's right flank attacking my left is also beginning to overwhelm me in terms of sheer numbers, but my extreme left has actually destroyed all of the units the enemy sent against them, which means I can now peel around and outflank the enemy. So actually my left flank's in a pretty good position right now, and I should be able to defeat the enemy. You can see some of them are actually already retreating, so that's going to make things even better. It looks like I've got another unit just freed up on the left flank, so all I have to do is circle around this big blob of troops that you can see here, and I'll get rid of their local advantage. You can see my centre is pushing out, folding onto both flanks and rushing down the hill to defeat the new enemy units that are coming into the engagement even before they reach the spear wall, because I sensed victory at this point. I wanted to charge out and just destroy the enemy because I knew they were all exhausted. I thought my men probably can beat troops even of superior quality to their own because of this energy advantage that they have. You can see the spear walls folding again onto my right flank here. They're just going to be poking their way through this blob of enemy troops, so that should turn the battle in my favour in this area. The enemy still have lots of troops in the area, but I do also have lots of reserves that I'm deploying around this stage. All of them are Yari Ashigaru, but still Yari Ashigaru are powerful enough in this situation. You can see Murayuri sitting here, not even looking at the battle. He doesn't even care anymore. Maybe just confident of victory. You can see my archers are dueling with the enemy archers at the back, but almost all the enemy archers are dead. If we can zoom back over to the hill where the ninjas are fighting, there's only about 10 or so of those ninjas left, but they are fighting on. The entire hillside is covered in bodies. They've been doing very well, destroying enemy units left, right and centre while they're up here, and of course distracting them from the main force. But these men can only last so long, and I believe it's around this point that they actually routed. However, back over with the main force, things are going well. You can see the enemy here is beginning to get surrounded on my right flank. The enemy centre is gone, and on my left flank there's pretty much no hope for them either. They're all retreating. It looks like they deployed their archers in the last ditch attempt to break through the line, and that of course did not work very well. All of those who are still on the hillside are being slaughtered by the Oda men, who are now charging down the hill after the few survivors that are left. It looks like the enemy army has been completely destroyed in this engagement on the hillside. Very good news, but the battle isn't over because not all of the units are routing. See, a whole bunch of them have left the field. Hardly any of them are actually left on the field. My ninjas here are running from the field. I believe there was 4 or 5 of them who survived the engagement and ran, but as they ran, the enemy ran as well, so just everyone retreated from that battle on the other hillside. The last enemy unit was their general, who's fighting on. I moved forward some archers to delay him, and then all of my own generals' units came down for a final duel of the generals, just to really stick it to the enemy. And I believe we killed them very quickly. I think the initial charge may have killed the general himself, and we just had to mop up a couple of the bodyguards who were left. So this means victory has been won. The Oda forces. These men stand and celebrate, and they're right to do so, because this victory is very important in Oda's campaign. Here's Oda Nobuhide himself sitting amongst the victorious men. So we've defeated 3 enemy stacks, including the main force of the Amako army. I believe we killed the Amako daimyo and his son in this battle. However, we also lost a very large number of troops. Of the initial force we started with, I don't believe any of them really survived. You can see the entire field is littered with bodies, both of ours and theirs. Of course, this means we don't have many men left back on the strategy map to deal with any other armies that come up, so we're going to have to play it carefully after this battle. However, that does not mean it is a bad thing, because we've kept Umi, an extremely important province in the layout of our empire, and we've kept all of our officers alive. So overall, it's good news, but we're going to have to see what the losses really amount to when we get back to the strategy map. So we look at the battle report. We've lost over 5,000 troops of the 7,000 we deployed. The enemy lost just over 6,000 troops of the 7,000 they deployed. So a slight advantage in terms of numbers of men killed. But you can see here that loads of our regiments are completely gone. We're going to have to be very careful here. We can just about put together one stack of troops from those that remain. Nobuhide's force completely destroyed. Very bad for Nobuhide. So now, as the enemy forces are destroyed or run from Umi, we face the uncertain future of Oda on the next Oda episode. That's all for this episode, but to see the Takeda continue their fight to bring their fractured domain into one unstoppable empire, join me next time on the Eternal Law.